So this is not a video anyone particularly wants to make, but it is newsworthy, and I do have thoughts about the situation and what happened yesterday. Now, for those of you who are not aware, my name is Kevin the Apptrepreneur, and for those of you who usually watch my videos, you know how the story works. I talk about a news story, I share my opinions, but here's the thing. This is going to technically be two videos for the price of one. I didn't upload a video yesterday or the day before. The day before, I was kind of out of it. Yesterday it just did not feel like not a good time to do a video, and I didn't know what to say. So here's the thing. I am going to comment about the, frankly, historic events that happened at Washington Capitol yesterday. But first, we're going to talk about this story. So for those of you who want to hear my thoughts on what happened, you're going to have to wait a little while. But let's talk about the first major story that really does have something to do with my channel. I try not to talk about politics. Once in a while I do. Like everyone, I can't help myself, but I try to be respectful. But now, President Trump has invaded the tech news space by getting himself suspended on Facebook and Instagram for, at the very minimum, the last 14 days of his presidency. Twitter, by the way, has also suspended him for 12 to 48 hours, and they say the ban might be permanent, depending on his actions and what he writes. Now, my personal opinion, I don't believe Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, has any interest in getting rid of Donald Trump. In fact, Twitter was pretty much on its road to becoming irrelevant until Donald Trump became a big tweeter during the president, like the first president that actively announced things through tweets. It sounds so ridiculous, but that's how it worked out, and Twitter is now more relevant than ever. So Jack Dorsey is not interested in suspending Trump permanently. He'll probably give a bunch of slaps on the wrists. And they made these suspensions not necessarily because they wanted to. They really didn't want to do this. Like I said, Trump draws traffic. But because they could have been potentially held liable, but now that has boned them in another big way. But first, let's look at the story from Business Insider. Facebook suspends Trump until the end of his presidency. Facebook has blocked President Donald Trump indefinitely, CEO Mark Zuckerberg said in a post Thursday. Zuckerberg said the company believes the risks of allowing the president to continue to use our service during this period are simply too great. Facebook is therefore extending its block that it had already placed on Trump's account, a ban that will last for at least the next 2 weeks, quote, until the peaceful transition of power is complete, unquote. Now then, let's see if we can't just read the whole post. So Mark Zuckerberg wrote in full, and this was about 12 hours ago, well, probably a little bit longer by the time you're seeing this video. The shocking events of the last 24 hours clearly demonstrate that President Donald Trump intends to use his remaining time in office to undermine the peaceful and lawful transition of power to his elected successor, Joe Biden. His decision to use his platform to condone rather than condemn the actions of his supporters at the Capitol building has rightly disturbed people in the U.S. and around the world. We removed these statements yesterday because we judged that their effect and likely their intent would be to provoke further violence. I actually don't completely disagree with this, but again, we'll get to that later. Following the certification of the election results by Congress, the priority for the whole country must now be to ensure that the remaining 13 days and the days after the inauguration pass peacefully and in accordance with established democratic norms. Over the last several years, we have allowed President Trump to use our platform consistent with our own rules, at times removing content or labeling his posts when they violate our policies. We did this because we believe that the public has a right to the broadest possible access to political speech, even controversial speech. But the current context is now fundamentally different, involving use of our platform to incite violent insurrection against a democratically elected government. We believe the risks of allowing the president to continue to use our service during this period are simply too great. Therefore, we are extending the block we have placed on his Facebook and Instagram accounts indefinitely and for at least the next 2 weeks until the peaceful transition of power is complete. And I don't think this is completely unfair. Now, Trump, I'm not going to get into the whole inciting violence argument to too much. Frankly, I think the man's words speak for themselves. I think the fact that he was tweeting March 6th, big day, and he was really goading on his supporters to, fight for him, like literally fight for him. And there's tweets by Donald Trump Jr. also, by the way, who has also stated that people need to fight like hell, against a corrupt system. Here's the thing. Whether we like it or not, I do believe Joe Biden was elected fairly. And I know that the media has definitely not helped their case. If you want to know how confusing the media has made this, and, maybe my parents can understand where I'm coming from when I say this, it's because right before the election, the media was saying things like, Donald Trump is doing everything he can to corrupt this election. He's trying to fix it. I don't know if you can see my dog in the background. He's making a little bed right now. This is going to be the most unfair, corrupt election ever. Then Joe Biden wins, and the story is this was the most non-eventful election ever. This was the most secure election ever. Nothing went wrong. And it's like, okay, well, clearly one of those statements isn't true, because they can't both be correct. But I digress. Things like this is why people don't like the media, because before the election happens, it's going to be a corrupt election if Trump will have cheated his way into the White House if it goes through. But once Biden won, well, wasn't so corrupt then, was it? At that point, it was the safest thing, apparently despite Trump's efforts. So there's reasons people don't like the media. But my position on this is pretty simple. The votes were counted. They were recounted. They were triple counted in some cases. And Biden is the president-elect. And he will be our president on January 20th. And much like I respected Trump because my dad raised me to respect the president, even if you didn't completely agree with him, I will respect Biden for the very same reason. Now, Trump has been peddling unfounded claims that the election was rigged and the election was stolen, and he's getting people more and more upset. Look, there's a reason we have a peaceful transition of power. It's not necessarily because anyone really wants to do it. It's not because people necessarily like the guy that they just lost to. It's not even that they feel particularly good about the fact that they lost. The reason we do it is because the needs of the country is greater than the needs of the party and even the individual. And so it's just a good way to kind of reunite everyone, say, hey, you know what? We lost. It happens. We'll come back again in 4 years. For the time being, we are all Americans. We all love this nation, and we all want the best for it. We might not always agree with what we want for it, but we do want the best for the country in our own way. And so we need to support this man or woman. Eventually there will be a female president, because they have our best interests at heart and they're going to do the best job that they can. And if we had one, we would like them to support us as well. So that's why we have a peaceful transition of power. It's by no means a legal requirement to do this, but it's just a good thing to do. Trump obviously has not done that. Well, actually, I take that back. He finally committed to a peaceful transfer of power after the fact, but, maybe we'll talk about that in a minute too. So, I agree with the peaceful transfer of power. Now, here's the thing. If you don't want to concede right away, and you want to challenge the election, you want to say, hey, I want to recount, I want to look closer at something, you know what? Do it. Go through the legal means necessary and, find out if what you believe to be true is true. Use whatever legal means necessary you have to see if this election actually worked out or not. But that didn't happen. It did. Trump had some 60-something cases. One of them wasn't thrown out until very recently, but the rest were all thrown out right away because there was no evidence. So you know what? There's no evidence that there was election fraud. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I can't just believe things because someone on Facebook said them to be true. And that is why Facebook and Twitter actually started fact-checking tweets and status posts. Now, this and this subsequent blocking of President Trump kind of bones them in a couple ways. You see, social media gets the freedoms that they have right now because they don't censor. Unless the thing is outright calling for violence, which this is definitely debatable if this was or not. Unless it's violent, it's specifically breaking a law, they don't touch people's opinions. At least that's what they claim. They don't touch people's opinions, and the reason they don't do this is because they don't want to be a publisher. They want to be a social media platform. But if you have an editor or someone in the sky saying what you can and can't put on the platform that is not related to something illegal, like, for example, if someone goes on Facebook and shares secrets on how you can best, let's say, get with underage people, that's a very, very illegal thing to do. And whether they're a free social media platform or publishing company, that needs to be removed. But barring anything illegal like that, they typically try not to touch things because they want to have the freedom to basically be free. If they start censoring things, then they are a publishing company. So the middle ground that Facebook and Twitter decided upon, and I think this is enough to keep them in that area where they are a free social media platform, is that they would put fact checks next to information that could not be verified. But of course that opens a whole can of worms. Well, who's deciding what's true and what's not true? Is there a bar for determining whether or not this is real or not? What if the main sources that Facebook uses or Twitter are sources people don't feel are trustworthy? And I mean, that's a whole nother can of words because, some people think that CNN is very trustworthy. Other people don't think CNN is very trustworthy. Same thing with Fox. I know a lot of people who right now all they watch is Newsmax, which I think that platform is completely out to lunch in my opinion. They don't source anything as far as I can see. But, for some people that's a credible source, and there has to be some bar for that. So that was the first little compromise that they made that puts them at risk of their social media platform. They are now fact-checking things, and people might disagree what they're fact-checking. Well, now they are removing posts from the President of the United States. And granted, social media has not been around for a long time, but this is kind of a new thing. We're actually going to remove something that the President of the United States wrote. And by all accounts, everyone should have access to the words of the President of the United States. So this is a really tricky one for them. Now, do I believe the message was, because the messages that they deleted was of Trump, addressing the rioters, if you will. Do I believe those were inciting violence? To be honest, I don't know, because I don't think that way. I mean, my opinion of those was that they did not help. In all fairness, he said to go home. He did say that these were special people, and while a lot of people took issue with that, there is some merit that sometimes to calm someone down, you kind of sweet talk them a little before asking them for a favor. So I'm not completely against that. Where he really messed up was he made it all about himself. This election was stolen from me, it was stolen from you, and that was the real emphasis. And those words were the problem and what incited the violence in the first place. So in my opinion, while I don't know if that message in and of itself incited the violence, there were other tweets that you could make a much stronger case for that did. I don't think it actually helped the situation. And so I don't think Facebook and Twitter were completely wrong to remove it. I mean, like I said, the main question this brings up for me now is Twitter and Facebook a neutral platform, or have they now, by necessity, some would say, taken a hard line, and they are now a publishing company, and they should lose some of their First Amendment protections? That's a question that will have to be asked another day. Now, for the record, since this has all gone down, Trump has made a new statement, some would say in desperation, but I'll take any little bit of goodness at this point, where he condemned the violence as mob crazy, that you do not attack the Capitol, that you do not put our senators America under siege, that he will commit to a peaceful transfer of power, and that those who were involved will pay dearly. Definitely nice to hear, but as they say, too little, too late. This is what should have been said the first time around, not a day and a half later. And certainly not after he did like not a protest, he did like a little rally, and he encouraged people to, fight for him. I really don't want to get too much into this. He uses some really, really bad phrasing sometimes. I'm sorry. I know I've got a lot of Trump supporters here, and, I'm trying to say this as gently as possible, but Trump's words were the problem. And, I'm sorry, but if you want your voice to be heard, you do it through the democratic process. You do not overtake the government because you didn't get your way. Here's the thing. Even think of it this way. What if, in some fantasy reality, this coup, and it was a coup, I know the word coup has been thrown around pretty liberally, and I hate the fact that the media throws coup around as if, like, every little disagreement is a coup. But no, this was an actual coup. This is what a coup looks like. You break into the doors, you threaten people's lives, and you demand something go your way that goes against the wishes of not only the Electoral College, but the popular vote in this case. You just don't do that. So, this was an actual coup. What if this was somehow successful? What if, you actually scared the senators into not validating the election? Well, guess what? Next time there's an election, let Trump, he can't do another 4 years, and let's say Pence runs for president, and you have a Democrat, and Pence wins this time. What if the liberals then go in and take over the Capitol and have that overturned? You don't do it this way. You can be disappointed in the outcome. You can be as disappointed as you want to be in the outcome, but you don't resort to terrorism. You just don't. And now we're going to actually talk about my thoughts on what happened, because here's the thing. What happened definitely disgusted me. It made me ashamed. I was very sad to see it. These are images that you would see in other countries that have dictators and less than democratic procedures. You see them overthrowing governments because they're corrupt. This wasn't a corrupt government. This was the Senate and the House verifying results of a legally held election that had been proven time and time again was not fraudulent. Now again, if you can actually find some evidence that was fraudulent, and not just conspiracy theories like, well, they stopped counting, what were they doing? You know what? They went to bed. I'm sorry. They probably went to bed. But if you can actually find the actual fraud, then it maybe needs to come to court. And I'm sorry, not all the states that rejected Trump's lawsuits were liberal states. Some of them were conservative states that said he's got nothing. And even though I don't necessarily recommend you do this, of course I looked on Facebook, and of course it got into bickering. A bunch of liberals saying oh, well, this is what I knew about the Trump supporters all the time. It's not healthy. There's actually a lot of Trump supporters who did not agree with what happened yesterday. But probably the most interesting thing I saw was this. And this is what I really want to address. This came from TrumpArena.com, so obviously it's biased. But here's the thing. These are real quotes from liberals and Democrats in Congress. I forgot who her name is, but she says, there needs to be unrest in the streets. Then you have Kamala Harris saying, protesters should not let up. And then you have Maxine Waters. If you see anybody from the cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and create a crowd and you push back on them and you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere. And then you have Nancy Pelosi, the one who's, the most vocal against Trump right now, says, I just don't know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be. Now, in all fairness, I don't know what this last quote is in reference to, but I do know that, these two were pretty much about the George Floyd murder, and this, I don't really know what that was for, but I think it had something to do with Brett Kavanaugh. And look, in all fairness, these quotes are real. And when you put these quotes next to what Donald Trump tweets, are they really that different? I would venture to say no. I would venture to say these are just as bad. In some cases, they might even be a little worse. But here's the thing, folks. I don't care anymore. Because when you see this getting shared, I'm kind of looking at, okay, why is this being shared in response when people show like Donald Trump Jr.'s tweet about, there needs to be civil unrest, or you need to fight back like hell, next to his, completely polar opposite, you respect the badge, you don't cause violence. What is people's intention when they share something like this? I mean, in my opinion, it should be for one thing, but here's what I think this is for. I think people use things like this as a justification that, hey, you see, they've been encouraging violence in the streets and whatnot. They praised the George Floyd protests, and buildings were burnt down, people were killed, and that was on a national scale, not just the state capitol. And people really didn't say anything about those, so if they can do these things, why can't I? That is not a healthy way to look at this, in my opinion. When I look at this next to Trump and Trump Jr., my response is, well, if there's a lesson to be learned that everyone can take away, it's that no one should be saying things like this. And I think things will change after this. I think there will be some legislation that will put sanctions on politicians who use hateful and violent rhetoric. You are officially elected officials, I should say. You are elected officials by the people to represent them, and the people typically want the best representation possible. So you know what? Yeah, Democrats said things like this, and they didn't get a lot of pushback. And Trump got way more pushback for his rhetoric. The bottom line is, I don't care anymore. This rhetoric is not acceptable from anyone, as far as I'm concerned. So I think going forward, we're going to have to come to an agreement that elected officials should not be using words like these. They should not be phrasing things in this way. I believe that they should all be forced to hire a Twitter handler, and before they send a tweet, it's got to go through this person. And this person will screen the tweet and run it through lawyers or whatever they have to do, and they say, hey, is this okay to share, or could this be misconstrued the wrong way, or could this be an incitement of violence? They're going to need to have someone to help with that. And I think there's going to have to be legislation that says, hey, if you as a, officially elected public official representative, you have been officially elected to be a representative for your state, for your county, whatever, if you are caught, whether online or in public, speaking things like this, and I say this, and the Democrats are up here, but, stuff that Trump tweeted too, then you know what? There will be sanctions put on you. And you know what? If you do it long enough, and if you do it consistent enough, you could lose that position. I think that just needs to happen. Because you know what? America is a great country. I was getting an illegal haircut today because, most of the places are closed. My wife couldn't take the long hair anymore. And the lady was from China. And she escaped a communist party. She actually got her mother over to the States a few years ago. And she was devastated by this. She really had no opinion of Trump, but she was disheartened that, she saw America destroying itself. Like, she came here because we were the land of opportunity. We were the ones who could put our differences aside and work together and maybe even compromise once in a while. And she's seeing it going up in smoke. Maybe not literally, but figuratively speaking. And, we talked a little bit more with masks on, of course. And we ultimately decided, hey, at the end of the day, the pros of living in America far outweigh the cons. But you know what? America is a dream. And you have to fight for that dream, and you have to fight for those values. And this is one of the reasons I typically don't talk politics, because I don't want to be divisive. You can be a Democrat or Republican. I don't care. You want to talk and you want to do it civilly, we can be friends. Heck, I might even disagree with what you say, but I will fight to the death your right to say it, as long as it's not illegal. That's my opinion. So yeah, what happened Wednesday was extremely harsh. I do not blame Zuckerberg for doing this. And I suspect Twitter will also hand a harsher sentence. I think they are going to be... This is going to hurt them in the long run because, again, there's going to be that debate. Are they a publishing site, or are they just a social media platform that just hosts content, but it doesn't tamper with it? That's going to be a question that's going to have to be asked going forward. For the time being, though, especially considering the sensitivity of the matter, I believe that this was the correct course of action. And by the way, they were also removing tweets from other people who were inciting violence. And so, again, some people might be saying, well, but do you know, like, the Sean Kings of the world who, like, tweet these violent rhetoric too? Yeah, there might have to be an even harsher look at that from now on. Unfortunately, social media is a very powerful tool that can be used for very bad things. Social media could be a very good thing in people's lives. You share cat pictures of your kids. During lockdowns, it should be extremely useful for talking with one another and maybe sharing how you're doing. And yet it's used as a political soapbox, and nobody cares about those political opinions. I'm sorry, they just don't. And friends become enemies, and it's sad. And it's really, really sad. I encourage people to get off social media as much as possible. Heck, I've kind of turned my Twitter into a dad joke of the day thing, where I post stupid dad jokes because, God forbid, somebody needs to put humor on this site. But, it was a dark week. November 6th was a very, very dark day. I know that that's not all Trump supporters. In fact, I know some Trump supporters who were quite disappointed in what went down. So, we need to remember that not all Trump supporters supported what happened. And for those who do support it, that's just sad. I'm sorry, but, to those people, if the Democrats did this 4 years ago, you'd be upset. And the fact that you're not upset now, I think, says a lot about how much you value the person or the party over the country. And yes, for the record, I was also equally upset by the George Floyd protests. Not the fact that there were protests. Again, you can protest all you want, but once it turns violent, then everyone needs to go home and calm down. So, anyway, that's my opinion. For whatever it's worth, I would like to know, what do you think about any of this, though? Remember, you must be civil. If I start seeing a bunch of name calling, your comments will be deleted. But if you want to discuss civilly what this week meant to you, your response to it, whether or not you think Facebook and Twitter made the right decisions that they did, hey, comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and take care of each other out there. Just be kind, okay?